Hello everyone, welcome to High Performance Computing Advanced Scientific Computing course. This is lecture 11, Deep Sequence Models and CFD Application. As we promised on the outline, we will have application of the deep sequence model in the fluid dynamic area in the lecture 11. Let's have a short review on the lecture 10, CFD application and OpenFOAM. We presented the short introduction about the OpenFOAM software as it's open source software, and we can modify a new code for a new problem, and it's compatible with some visualization software like PowerView, and it has a great capability to run on the parallel computing. We discussed that there are decomposition method. It's called simple, hierarchical, and Scotch, and what's the difference or what are the advantage and disadvantage of them. And then we mentioned how the decomposition on the three-dimension domain can be conducted, and what the effect of the boundary condition on the decomposition, and how there are two type of the boundary condition could be used in this regard, and we describe the difference between periodic boundary condition and non-periodic boundary condition. Also, we had detail about how to submit a batch for OpenFOAM on the HPC system with the example that you have the original batch file. You can use it for your assessment on the parallel computing. Now let's back to this lecture. We will talk about the turbulent flow in the fluid dynamic and why the forecasting is important, what the approach could be used for the forecasting, and how sequential model of the deep learning could be used in this area, and what the role of the HPC in these applications. Fluid flow prediction and deep learning and fluid dynamics. We mentioned in the fluid dynamics area, there are approaches could be used to deal with this problem. One of them is experiment, and the other one analytical approach, which is only available with a limited problem. Then we had the numerical approach, which for turbulent flow used as a Reynolds average Navier-Stokes RANS, large eddy simulation LES, and direct numerical simulation DNS. We talked about the difference and the advantage and disadvantage of these method, and especially in the HPC course, we emphasize on the computing power which is required to run LES and DNS, and they are costly in contrast to the RANs. Regarding the how we can apply the deep learning in the fluid dynamic area, usually when we are running the numerical solution, because of the power also, we cannot run a long period of the simulation for unsteady problems. Therefore, deep learning could be used in this area, especially because in the fluid dynamic, the properties of the flow are function of the location and time, and usually we say the data are spatial and temporal. To modify this application, it is necessary to find a connection between the deep learning model and the properties of the flow field. Therefore, we will present the sequential model, which they are basically working for time series, we can say, and we will explain how they can connect it to the physics of the problem with the turbulent flow, and we will present one of the recent novel application of the deep learning in the turbulent flow from our research group. In this lecture, we will talk about a recurrent neural network, one of the deep learning network that seems working properly with sequential data. And in the fluid dynamics area, especially in turbulent flow, we will define an approach how it can be used to have a time series of the data of the turbulent flow, and how it can be used with a recurrent neural network (RNNs). From the literature, uh, it's known that for nonlinear phenomena like turbulent flow, the deep learning has a great capability and is working with complex data. It's able to extract the hidden feature, and with mm, some combination of different deep learning model also, it is possible to uh, increase the performance, and the model is working much better. Uh, in this lecture, we will present one of the recent research and development by our research group, and how we used it in the fluid dynamic area, with determining a new framework in the fluid dynamic area, and using the data from it in the deep learning, how connecting the sequential model of the deep learning with the properties of the flow. RNNs networks, when working with extensive large data in the term of the period, which is mean long term, it's dealing with vanishing gradients, and that's why it could not be work properly with a long period of the data. Long short-term memory, it's a network variant from the RNN, which suggested in 1995, and it resolved the vanishing gradient issue. In fact, LSTM, using the structure with uh, a forget gate, input gate, and the output gate included 3 gates, and also it's keeping the information from the uh, previous data, which helping to uh, solving the vanishing gradient. In recent year, application of LSTM it's increased in the fluid dynamic area, especially with time series data. How most of the application they are using data from a numerical approach, which means the data measured from the CFD and not real data. And additionally, there is no definition how we can uh, use that approach in the with another data, which are the only use cases. Uh, in this lecture, with example that developed in our research group, we will see how we can make connection between deep learning architecture and layers, and the sequential feature of the fluid dynamic, and we see how it's working. However, from the LSTM, we have also another variant which is called GRU, and let's talk about GRU also, and what difference between LSTM and GRU. Gated recurrent units, GRU, is a variant from the LSTM, and indeed in the GRU, forget gate and input gate replaced with only one gate, update gate. These helping to reducing the computing, and it's important because it's helping in the speed up, and additionally it's working with fewer parameters than LSTM. Based on the literature that they use the GRU and LSTM in different areas, uh, they reporting that GRU is working faster than LSTM with same data set, and also keep the same performance. This is important in this in the term of the computation, because usually when we are working with deep learning model, that they are consist of many layers, And recently, because of the complexity of the data is used, the deep learning model is in the size they are increasing, they're getting bigger size, and also the data also is increased, and we are dealing with big data. Uh, in this regard, we can see in this day the distributed deep learning model come to the game. In fact, distributed deep learning split the uh, large deep model between different processors, or if the data is too large, we'll make a copy from each model to one processor and distribute the data between different processors. And you will see much detail about this approach in the upcoming lectures. However, I point to the importance of the computing, which is required in the deep learning model, which is regard the data, and also about the complexity of the model. Uh, the capability of the LSTM variant, it's reported in the literature in many applications. For example, for picture processing, for some data series, in the, for example, stock markets, and making prediction for uh, data from the measurement, and also from a numerical approach, and also using some data from the known analytical equation. It seems is great and has a able to predict with high accuracy with low error. Uh, However, the competition is matter when we are dealing with large data and when we are dealing with complex models. And we need to see how these parameters also impacting the result. When we have complex model, so we're expecting to increase the accuracy. However, we know getting a large model and number of the batch size, for example, it's impacting the accuracy. So that's why, based off the some example that use when we have a large number of the batch size, uh, maybe the error will goes up, and sometimes we need to find this number from the hyperparameter tuning, as we discussed it before in this course. Finding the optimum numbers for to designing a good deep learning model is required to take right uh, parameter selection and model design. And here we will focus on this matter to show example how could lead to optimum model. To have initial assessment of this model, here we're presenting a comparison of LSTM and Go with the data that we have in our research with similar data. The result show us the Go working faster than the LSTM, as is mentioned in the literature. For example, when we use 80% training data with Go and LSTM, Go was 8 to 12% faster than LSTM, and with 60% training, it was 5 to 10% faster. So it seems on the working with CPU without GPU, Go working faster than LSTM. However, when we use this similar model with the GPUs, the LSTM and Go presented same speed up. This matter could be relevant to the data, because when we are using the GPU, also it's important to see how large data we are using in our application. In fact, in our example that here we mentioned, we didn't have extensive data. Therefore, using the GPU maybe it doesn't help too much about the size of the data, and in fact, some time which is taken to split the model and data between different GPU could cover the time and then lead to same speed up. Therefore, this is not uh, mm, uh, this doesn't mean the GPU doesn't have benefit, but it's required to have larger data to see these uh, mm, impact on the result. However, with a CPU, GPU working faster than STO with such data, which is great because it's reducing the computation. When we are talking about the sequential data, here the question how we can make a connection between the sequential data and the deep learning model. In fact, we are dealing in the fluid dynamics, we're dealing with physical problem. Therefore, to define a time series of data, uh, it's important and it depends to its framework and how the feature are designed and how finding connection between the time and these data. We see how in this data we can find these time series and how we can make connection between them. Regarding application of machine learning, and we can say deep learning in the fluid mechanics, in 2020 there was paper that mentioned the importance of the application of the which could be focused on the turbulent flow, and we can deal with random and nonlinear term in the turbulent flow. Also, we can deal with high dimensionality. Therefore, we can help to have understanding one of the challenges in the physics, which known as unsolved problem. Uh, not Because usually when we are using numerical approach, we are dealing to trying to solve flow cases. But however, additionally to solving the problem, maybe deep learning could help us to understand this phenomenon and study the flow feature in addition to only solving, especially when we are dealing with unsteady flow, which during the time it has a transit position, and we need to understand what's happening during that. It's necessary to find uh, the processing of the data during the time and how the sequential data is working in such models. The most applicable method to use in the fluid dynamic data from the deep learning, it's data-driven model. In the data-driven model, usually we need the data to train the model and expect and make a prediction for the flow. Regarding the data in the turbulent flow as a complex and unsolved problem, there are two main resources to get the data that's reliable and could be used to understand and uh, know that they are based on the real world measurement. One of them is experiment. For the valid experiments, uh, we can have reliable data to make a prediction and train a model. The other one from the CFD, however, from the CFD for turbulent flow, as we discussed before, runs providing the average result. So the data that we have with the average doesn't carry all the information from the flow. LES also, as we said, it's solved based off the specific size of the eddies, and then it's compute the smaller scale, which is not accurate solution. But DNS is the most accurate solution in the CFD. Therefore, to have a reliable data for the CFD, the DNS data could be used. Uh, for the analytical problem, however, in the literature, there are some research now to assessing the deep learning model. They are using data from the analytical approach. That means for a problem, we have an analytical solution. They are using from this data analytical solution and make a prediction on, and they um, comparing the result from the deep learning model with the analytical solution. Maybe this is a good idea to mm, uh, access the deep learning model, but however, it doesn't make sense that why we consider analyzing model. when we have analytical solution for it. So it doesn't help us more than this to understand this phenomenon. Therefore, we can say the main source of the data it's DNS from the CFD and experiment. From the overview, if we look to the data, there is an aspect of the correlation. It's very important when we are using data, we need to look at the correlation of the data. What's the correlation between them? Sometimes maybe we are using some, because we are in the deep learning, as we know, we are looking for the target, and then we have some variable that this there should be a correlation between the target and the input or the data we are feeding the model to train with that. That's why here the sequentiality of the data is very important when we are talking about a target, for example, the velocity. Is the velocity has a correlation with the time or with the other parameter? For example, the acceleration has a correlation between velocity or time or location or displacement. So these are very important parameter. It must be considered when we want to use data to train the deep learning model in the fluid dynamic area. Now let's have a statement about applying the computer power. Regarding the turbulent flow here, you can see this figure is presenting the structure of the turbulent flow. In fact, in the turbulent flow, based on the last hypothesis, we have a scale, a large scale and a small scale. And it seems the flow in the beginning has a large scale, and then during the time, the energy transferred from large scale to a small scale to a small scale. In the large scale, the dominant feature controlled by the large scale, but in the small scale, the dominant feature will be based on the viscosity in the fluid dynamics. These are fundamental concept of the turbulent flow and how this process is happening, what feature is impacting the initial condition, boundary condition, and the material properties, how it's impacting these uh, transfer of the energy between the different scales. Still, it's unsolved. Therefore, especially when we are talking about large scale, there is not much known about the uh, large scale, the turbulent flow. However, there are many questions maybe comes up, but we have a statement here from Peter Yostino. He said, "We used to have a lot of questions to which there were no answers. Now, with the computer, there are lots of answers to which we haven't thought of the questions." So this is the idea that suggesting, okay, let's now use the computer power to answer some question that are and don't create a new question. This is a great idea. So we can say the deep learning is a great idea that is come to game now, and we can use it to at least understand some problem and deal with some obstacle that is available. Turbulent flow, as it's known as unsolved problem, in 1941 there is a hypothesis. It's called hypothesis of the Kolmogorov K. We call it K41. It's defining a theory about the turbulent flow, that how the energy transfer from large scale to small scale, and defining some scale size in the term of the time, and especially also. However, this theory has some assumption which is not universal, and we can see these assumptions in the specific condition. One of them is a topic, turbulent flow. In fact, most of the flow on is a topic, so we can't say this hypothesis working everywhere. And also there turbulent flow and non-equilibrium, which his mean is doesn't cover every condition of the turbulent flow to be determined. That's why we have this statement from uh, Richard Feynman when he said turbulence is the most important unsolved problem of classical physics. In this slide, you can see this nice presentation of the area of the study for turbulent flow. We have the experiment, we have the simulation or numerical approach, and we have the theory. Combining all of these approaches together, uh, what we have so far is from these areas that combine together. In recent deep learning also, it's added much more understanding and some application which helping to see how the turbulent flow could be studied with these new tools. Regarding the sequential data, as we said, we need to have correlation between the input data and the target data. So it needs to specify framework for it. In the fluid dynamic, we have two main viewpoints of framework. It's used to define the properties in the flow field. One of them Lagrangian and one of them Eulerian. If we want to have a very simple definition for them, in the Eulerian framework, we can assume one single point in the flow. It's stationary and the flow passing this point. Uh, what measurement we are taking for this one is based off the Eulerian viewpoint. In the different viewpoint, which is called Lagrangian, assuming a point or particle move in the flow, which following the flow, and it's not stationary. So every single time step when we are measuring, it has a different displacement and has its properties. Based on the Lagrangian framework, there is a correlation between the properties of the particle when it's moving, which this particle or point it's carried by the flow. There is a correlation between these properties, which could be velocity and displacement and the time. So it seems that Lagrangian framework is a great option to define as a framework to make a connection between the uh, flow properties and deep learning. Since we are talking about the sequential deep learning model, which they are as a time working as a time series, we can assume we have time series of the velocity, we have time series of the displacement, we have time series of the acceleration, we have time series of the velocity in the fluid dynamics, and we can train the model with this data and looking for the target. For example, we can train a model with time, with displacement and velocity, and the target also is the velocity. And we train the model to more time find the upcoming velocity and how it look like. I'm making a test. In the industry and in the laboratory experiment, there are different methods to take a measurement from the flow. We have the flow method, which is used in the industry, uh, which we can say is based on the Eulerian because we have a specific location with these instrument tools installed and making measurement at this specific point. We have the CTA, the constant temperature anemometer, and also it's called hot wire in the same application. Laser Doppler anemometer, pitot tube, light detection, and imaging. These are different data, these measurements that could be used with different devices. However, from the different view, we can doing the setup between the deep learning data and the data that are measured. Additionally, in the turbulent flow, based on the study, there are different approaches to study the turbulent flow. One of them a statistical approach and one of them deterministic approach. Therefore, it's very clear that having a statistical data from the turbulent flow with different realization could provide us good data to train the model. Then, as we know, the statistic statistical data is working for turbulent flow, having a statistical measurement from the turbulent flow will provide a possibility to use this data for deep learning models. Therefore, so far we specified how we can make a connection between the deep learning model and the data that could be measured in the turbulent flow. We have the Lagrangian framework that we can define the time series data of the flow properties, and we can find the correlation between these properties, and using it for such model like LSTM or GRU, which they are very similar variants, and then investigate the parallel computing in these such models. This definition helping us to find a connection between Lagrangian framework in turbulent flow and the sequential model in the deep learning. Maybe it's not limited to the LSTM and GRU that we are presenting here. Of course, there are upcoming model, and at the time that we are talking, for example, the transformer is the one of the other deep learning model could be used, which is could be develop with such model and make a prediction model for turbulent flow. Now let's shortly here present the data that using the experiment. In this slide, you can see picture from the apparatus which using that experiment. This apparatus is a tank filled with a water, and with 8 impeller in the corner of this tank with a specific speed of the rotation, making the flow is turbulent. And there is an area in the center of the tank specified with green color here, taking measurement with high-speed camera and measuring at the specific period of the time. But how we are measuring the properties of flow? This based off the particle tracking in the experiment of the fluid dynamic. We have this approach that we can see the flow with a particle, and then tracking this particle with laser light and detection system. Then we can tracking each particle motion and giving us its displacement, its velocity, and we can calculate the acceleration also. In this study, tracer particle are used. Tracer particle, that's mean particles that have similar density to the water, so they can follow the streamline. And also we have a specific term, it's called the Stokes number, is calculated for this particle to be sure that the particle, when they are seeded, they're moving with the streamline of the flow, which is mean when we are measuring the properties of this particle, we are measuring the properties of the flow. This all done in the experiment. Therefore, to define also a specific motion of this flow, 2 disks in the apparatus is available up and down, and at the specific time they are moving toward to the center with the nearly constant speed to creating deformation or stereo deformation in the flow. All of these conducted action making the flow with a specific condition which doesn't have unknown pattern to follow or define its motion. Therefore, we have a flow of the particle, measurement particle, which there is no known model for them and there is no equation to define them. So we can use this data to define and their motion and make a prediction model that how this particle could be followed. This table here is presenting the data and how it looks like. It's meant for every specific time or every time stamp. We have properties include displacement and velocity for every single particle. Since we are working with statistical data, so there are a lot of data. Here in this table, you can see 270 640 particles in this table is available. We can define the ratio of the training, for example, 60% or 80%, and with the rest of the data making the test on this data. Uh, so these also this data here is measured with one camera. In the particle tracking method, when we are using one camera, we have two-dimensional data. However, we should mention that here, because the experiment performed in the real world, it includes all the data from the turbulent flow, and it's uh, different with some data that could be obtained from the numerical approach, because in the numerical approach we have some limit. Maybe we cannot study some effect like the gravity because of the complexity and the computation, but here the real world data is available with all effective parameters. Because turbulent flow is a three-dimensional phenomenon. If you are doing simulation only two dimension, it doesn't cover all the information of the turbulent flow. It is necessary to make a simulation in three dimension to have a full information of it. So therefore, in the experiment, we have all the required information of the turbulent flow. In this slide, you can see a result from the prediction by this LSTM and GRO model. The left-hand side presenting the result when the uh, training with 80% of the ratio of the data, and the left-hand side, the right-hand side, when the training data with 60% ratio and 40% test data. And we can see how the prediction is matching with the test data, which it's presenting the great capability of this model. How is still some questions that are relevant? For example, if we have longer period of the data, because the short time period of the data here is too short. If we have longer period of the data, does it work? How with longer period of the data will be much longer, which make it much more complex to see if it's possible or not. This table here also is presenting the metric measured for this example, which is mean when we have one node with one GPU or four GPU for 80% training, and in the term of 60% training, what's the difference? Of course, the error between the 60% and 80% could be different. However, with more data, we can reduce the error. But here it's important we see when we use one node and one GPU, the GRU working faster than LSTM. This is what we mentioned in the previous slide. However, with more GPUs, LSTM and GRU performing with similar speed up. Regarding term of the data, uh, as we know, deep learning, they are basically working with larger data. So if we are able to have a larger data for the training, we should expect that we have a much better result and prediction for such model. And this is the one point should be mentioned here. However, the definition of this model here, and that how explain the connection between the data from the Lagrangian viewpoint and the deep learning model, which could be an STM or GRU, or for example, transformer, is a great design to be used and make a prediction for turbulence flow. Longer prediction of turbulence flow could help us to understand if this phenomenon may be much better. And here we ended this with this lecture, deep sequence model and CFD application. There is a video presenting the application of the neural network in the physics of fluid, and I suggest you to watch it. The link is available in the references, and you can get access to see how a deep learning application is used in this area. In next short lecture, we will continue to the lecture that this year is has a special on the CFD and HPC application, and we can see how the application of different areas of the numerical of the CFD and other approaches relevant to the HPC, which is very important in this development. Thank you and good luck. We will continue in next lecture.